Well, good morning, everybody. This is Irene, again, with the National Foster Parent Association, welcoming you to Coffee Caregivers. So I have a really big cup today to share with you, and it's all about being on a cruise. My husband and I really do like to do that once in about every 2 or 3 years if we can. The reason why I dug this one out now is because we were supposed to go on a cruise in August, and of course that's not going to happen. So now it's next year in August that it's scheduled. But I'm having the cruising need right now, so my cup is going to have to do me every day now until I get over this why I need to be out on the water thing. And this too shall pass, right? As everything does.
Right.
But that's why my cup is special today, because I take it with me when we go on cruises. It's just the right size and it keeps my drinks cold. So we have a wonderful guest today. Way that it's an honor to work with in many ways. She serves on our board of directors, and she's also a friend. And so this is Cate Hawks. Cate, there's so much about Cate that I've asked her to introduce herself so she can tell you what she believes is the most important thing for you to know, or things to know about her.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Longtime supporter of National Foster Parent Association and the fabulous work that is done by the board and our wonderful Irene Clements. I think the thing I'm most proud about in my child welfare work, other than the fact that I have amazing grandchildren, and I've had the opportunity to take care of them for a while, so that was a wonderful opportunity. But I think from my work perspective, I had the opportunity in Illinois after I left as the Inspector General for the mental health system to go to work for the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Illinois, Chicago. And there I secured a contract with the Department of Children and Family Services to begin doing research around the area of children who were being placed out of state in residential facilities. At that time, Illinois had over 1,000 children who had been placed in out-of-state residential care. And I took on a project to review a sampling of those records for those children, and then set about going out to each state and actually visiting with the children who had been placed out of state to learn more about them and to understand kind of the profile of their needs and care. Because the director then of the child welfare system was Jess McDonald, and he was very interested in bringing those children back. So at the University of Illinois Chicago, we developed what we called our behavioral health program, and we brought up all of the profiles of those children to look at what kind of services that they needed. At the same time, Jess was working with Children and Family Services to create the subsidized guardianship program to allow relatives to take on the care of children. And so he used our project to make some determinations about therapeutic foster homes as well as subsidized guardianship, and allowed us to create a no-decline hospital-based program that would allow children, rather than going to out-of-state placement, the residential facility or the home where they were currently living could ask to come to our hospital-based program where we had a team of individuals. And I'm very proud of this because I worked and developed all of this. All of these things I'm talking about are things that I kind of developed and I'm very proud of, and it's still in existence today. We created a whole team of people. So there was an occupational therapist, a social worker, a teacher, a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a social worker, all kind of wrapped around those children when they came into that hospital-based program. And the child was able to determine who their advocate was going to be, who was going to speak for them. And then that person was their advocate on the unit, but also when the child was ready to go back to the same residential facility or the same home, which is one of the commitments the facility had to make, the child's advocate that they had selected was the one that worked with them with their home or their residential facility until that child discharged the advocate. Wow. So I was very pleased and excited about that particular program. Aside from that, I've been a deputy secretary in Florida for Jeb Bush. I have been child welfare director for Virginia. I have been a regional director for mental retardation in Tennessee. And I created the Foster Parent Association, Foster Adoptive and Kinship Association here in Virginia. I'm now an individual consultant and having a blast doing these kind of things with you, Irene.
Okay, so do you have a cup to share with us this morning?
I have a cup. My cup says, I'm a grandma. What's your superpower? I bet there's a lot of grandmas with this cup, but this cup is going to be very, very special from the children that I was able to be with for about a year. And I love all of my grandchildren. I have 6. So I would do anything for them. And if they think that's a superpower, I'm good with that.
Right, exactly. I hear you. Nothing better than being grandma. That's
right. That's right.
Well, Kate, we wanted to spend some time this morning talking about foster parents, working with the parents of the kids that their families through foster care. And to build on the intent of the theme of National Foster Care Month,
right.
That, our job as foster parents really is not only to keep the child safe, only to work towards each child's well-being for the future. And a big part of that completely depends on the relationship with their parents.
Definitely. Definitely.
And the minute they've had to move
right
home and their family to somebody else's.
Right.
And that critical need never ends.
It doesn't.
It never ends.
No.
I learned that, adopting 4 through the system.
You have some great stories about that too.
Their needs for their family, regardless of how much they were acclimated to ours and loved us and are truly our kids and their mama and daddy, they still needed that other family, and they needed to know they were okay. And if they weren't okay, could they help them?
Right.
All those things. And so I wanted to spend some time, because I know you've studied on this a lot, and you have a number of webinars about it recently. And there's an avenue for folks to see those that you can explain, but just the kind of the dynamics of it. And then it's right, whenever you're ready, I'd like to tell a true story about a particular family that we worked with.
Great.
Our children, and that relationship now is going on to 22 years.
I know. You told me that story, and every time you tell me that story, I start crying. It's so amazing. It's a fabulous story. And the fabulous part of it is it's so true.
It is.
You can't make this stuff up.
Nope.
Yeah. I think, Irene, I think one of the things that kind of has to be the foundation for any discussion like this is to really help people understand what you were talking about earlier, which is these children, they will look at the door and wait to see, is this person going to come back in, whether it's out of a fear or it's out of, please don't abandon me, I want you to come back. And Pauline Boss has done some amazing work on the area of ambiguous loss. And she's talked about it from the perspective of immigrants to people who have family members with Alzheimer's. But ambiguous loss is such a real dynamic for children who are in foster care. And if we don't address that, then we are doing a disservice to those children. Those children are every day, no matter how much they may love you as a foster parent or even as an adoptive parent when they go through the adoption process, they're always in the back of their head because this person is not gone from the planet. This person is out there somewhere. So they are always dealing with this idea that of this ambiguous loss, this grief that they have to go through that never gets closure, because that person could anytime in their eyes and their minds could come back through that door, and they don't know when that's going to be or if that's going to be. And because of this phenomena of ambiguous loss, it gives us a good foundation for understanding how we need to develop our foster care system to be even more responsive to those birth parents and those kinship caregivers. So I think that I'd like to use that kind of as an entree into some of the dynamics that people need to understand in order to understand why this working with birth parents is so very important. So I just want to go over a few facts, and I want everyone to understand kind of the child welfare statistics. And these are all, based upon a certain point in time, but they're basically the same year to year, given, some movement in numbers, but never that massive of a movement in numbers. But every year, there are over 440,000 children in the United States who are living in foster care. And that's the formal foster care. So if you're a kinship care provider who is licensed as a foster parent, you're counted in that foster care statistic. 32% of those children who are in foster care are living in the home of a relative, and 45% are living in the home of a non-related foster parent. Those statistics tell us that there is a need to make sure that these relatives and these foster parents understand the dynamic that the child is going through, but also understand there's a dynamic with the birth parent that we have to latch onto. We have to find a way to support everyone who is involved in the foster care system, not just the child, but the birth parent. And one of the reasons we need to do that is because 56% of the children who are in foster care have a goal of reunification. And 49% of the ones that exit go back home. And then there's, I had another statistic in mind that I'm not thinking of right now, but the majority of children who are in foster care, so that we understand the need for working with parents, 75% are coming in as a result of neglect, not the horrendous, awful abuses that create the aggravated circumstances that, of course, under no circumstances will those children ever go home. But the situation most of the children find themselves in, the families find themselves in, is either a lack of understanding how to parent, a mental illness that is in the way of their parenting, a substance abuse and alcohol abuse situation, or even poverty. Even though children are not supposed to be removed from poverty, poverty often leads to neglect. And so for that reason, we have to be thinking about what can we be doing to shore up those families so those children are not living in an ambiguous loss situation, that they do have the opportunity to maintain their family roots, if not with their birth parents, then with a relative who they have a family tie with. And the reason this is so important to think about all of this as we move into the next phase of this conversation is that our country invests over $9 billion in child welfare every year. $9 billion from national and state funds are being used to support child welfare. And that doesn't include food stamps, medical care, and all the ancillary types of services and supports that children are going to be needing. And I think that what we have to recognize is that with that kind of an investment, we cannot not utilize our foster parents, who are a tremendous resource for these families. Our country is continuing at this point in time to make shifts in how we look at foster care. And right now, this shift is a very good shift. It is a shift on saying we need to find ways to help children return home, to support those families and help those children return home.
Right.
But that can't mean that we're not utilizing foster parents. We've invested $9 billion every year in foster care and child protective services. We need to use that investment to support those foster families who are supporting birth families, who are supporting reunification. Many times people ask, and I just want to make sure I say this so that they understand, kinship care. Kinship care has many different faces. You can be a kinship care provider who is not receiving any type of support, and you just agreed to take on children because your kids called you and said, we're in a bad place, we need you to take on the children for us for a little while. You could be an approved foster home and be a kinship caregiver. You could be a relative who gets called in the middle of the night from Child Protective Services who says, hey, I'm going to have to take the children away from their birth parents. The birth parents are wondering if you would take them so they don't have to enter foster care right now with a foster parent. till we can figure out what needs to be done in the home. And that also is kinship care. So it's got a lot of faces, right? You know that. It sure does.
Sure does.
Yeah. And so right now there are, well, let's back up. There's over history, there's been very little support of kinship care in terms of financial support. Kinship caregivers were doing it basically with very limited income, oftentimes living on Social Security or less, living in HUD housing that didn't even allow children to be there, so they had to find new places to live. But in this country, with the advent of new legislation, work is being done to find ways to support those kinship caregivers. So now states are getting some incentive to reprogram some of their money they get from the federal government to support those kinship caregivers. And by doing that, what we are doing is we are creating a new opportunity for foster care. And that's where I think we need to focus. What do you think?
I agree with you 100%.
All right. So what I would like to do is to remind people that with the $9 billion annual investment that we are making in child welfare, we should be considering looking into best practices that will allow us to utilize foster parents in whom we've made that significant investment through training and support as resources for families of origin and kinship families. Those families could be involved in the family engagement meetings, having an opportunity to be trained with the birth parents about how to communicate best, how to make the best plans for children, what is in the best interest of those children and those families, how can we all work together, not separately, not in competition, but together. Foster parents could be seen as mentors to kinship caregivers and birth parents to help those children make that bridge over to either kinship care or returning home. And there needs to be a thought about how we utilize those foster parents as mentors. And then to keep that child's engagement with the foster parent who they've come to know and respect and have a connection to, utilizing those families as respite, making sure that those children do not lose that very important, productive adult contact that they have had as their safety net when the family, the birth family and the kinship family have had to get resources or support or other kinds of help to be able to bring the children back home, or at least back with a relative. And I think your story is one of the most amazing stories that I've heard about how this needs to work. Because if we can find a way to allow those children to have mutual adult engagements so that it's not either or, it's that you're either with a foster parent or you're with a birth parent, but instead you are all working together and you are creating a family continuity for that child so that when they struggle, there's a fallback for the family without that child having to re-enter foster care, that there's an opportunity for the families to share their learning experiences. And I think this is a great time for you to talk about your story, because your story just demonstrates that right to a T. Tea, and that's what I'm drinking, tea.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, I know you've heard this story before because it's been so impactful. Expectation is that we do everything we can to help families reunify. And that was an expectation when we became foster parents, and is an expectation that should be honored at this point in our history as well, and certainly well into the future. We were very fortunate. During the 27 years we fostered, we had 127 children join our family. And we were able to work with pretty much every parent, and oftentimes extended family, grandparents, for those children in order to try to maintain that relationship and the importance of it, the significance of it, regardless of what the permanency plan was going to wind up being. But fortunately for many, many of these families, it actually was reunification. One family in particular that I've shared before because it's such a significant relationship, about now 22 years, We had a brother and a sister who joined our family. I think they were 8 and 9. And pardon me, the mom just did a lot of silly things, things that made no sense oftentimes, things that she knew better not to do. And in getting to know her, I realized that this mother really did love her children. She just didn't know how to be a parent. Didn't have a clue. After meeting her mom and some of her siblings, I realized that they all had issues, all their families. So when CPS was looking for a relative, they looked at the mom's brother and sister, and neither one was able to meet the kids' needs. But they were a close family, and so we knew that not only was grandma, but the aunt and uncle and their families important to the children we had. So we built a relationship with the mom and with her family that included the kids and all the family celebrations, the birthday parties, funerals, so that we could share all of that and that the kids were not left out. It meant I had to drive from where we lived out in the country about 40 miles to get to the town where the family lived. And so we did that a lot over 2 years. At the end of that 2 years, the mom had actually pulled herself together and was doing better. And so the kids went home. About a year later, we got the call that not only the two we had before were coming back into care, but also the younger sibling, another boy. And would we be able to accommodate? And we said, of course, we wanted. I'm so happy that we had 3 openings, right? And so they joined our family. And mom had slipped back and doing all the things that kept getting her in trouble, getting her put in jail, just things that didn't make sense. But throughout the whole time, her demonstration of love, motherly love, was evident. During that period of time, we invited her to our home. She came at least 3 Saturdays out of every month to observe how we functioned as a family, how we parented her children, how we parented our kids. And she was trying to learn. She really was. She was putting effort. So another couple of years go by, and it's time to go to court. And this time we get a notice saying that they were going to have a termination trial. We went to court. I was called as a witness. And when it was my turn to go into the courtroom, I went up and answered the questions, as I was bound to do. And I was very honest about this mother's love that I knew was there, but also the apparent incapability of retaining enough appropriate information to keep her kids safe and certainly well. After I finished my testimony, I went and sat in the very back of the courtroom on the back bench in that courtroom. And as I walked past the table with the mom and her attorney, She was crying. And I knew it hurt her feelings about what I said, but I had to be honest for these children. As I walked past the table and started to walk down the aisle in the courtroom, she was behind me, so I didn't see it, but I heard the judge say, "Ma'am, where are you going?" And I could look back. I thought, surely he's not talking to me. And she was up and she was coming after me, following me. So I proceeded on. Her attorney, the judge talked to the attorney. The attorney said, "Sir, I don't know." And so the judge said, "Okay, let's see where she goes." So I go back and I sit down and she comes and sits next to me. And I'll never forget it because she takes my left arm. She sits real close. She wraps my arm around her shoulder like this and puts her head right here and cries. We had a connection. She knew things were going to be rough, but she knew that she had somebody who cared, not just for her kids, but for her. And the judge then said, when it was time, it was all over with, and the rest of the witnesses had spoken, he was making his decision. He asked me from the bench, "Ms. Clements, you appear to have a really strong connection with this family and the mom. Are you going to be there for them in the future?" And I said, "Yes, Judge, I am. I could never turn my back on them. I cannot be the foster parent, anymore, depending on what your ruling is. But I will always be this family's champion because I know she loves her children. She just can't figure out how to be a parent." So the judge, instead of terminating her rights, said, "I'm not going to do that. These kids are older now. They were 15, 14, and 13. And we're going to give this another try with mom. Because Ms. Clements says that she's going to be a champion for this family." Well, needless to say, we all walked out of that courtroom. The mother was filled with joy. But we had a very serious talk in the hallway at the courthouse about what did this mean. And I told her, no matter how much I care about you, I have to take these kids' safety first over that. And so you need to know that. And you need to know that the kids all know how to get a hold of us, right? But we will be there when you need us or when they need us, because I never want this to happen to your family again. I don't want you separated again. Well, that was 22 years ago. So we've had a relationship that's been very healthy. Mom did not take advantage of this relationship. The kids didn't take advantage. They visit. They're all parents now. Grandma and grandpa to, I think, 7 from 3 of them. We see them at the holidays. Sometimes mama comes along. And that's the way it should be. When I was in Washington, D.C., about a year and a half ago now, I was meeting with Commissioner Milner from the Children's Bureau, and we were talking about this very topic. And I said, "Well, Commissioner, I've got a text I want to show you. I just got it about 2 weeks ago, and I saved it because I knew I was coming up here to have this conversation with you. And let me tell you a little bit the background." And so what I just told you is what I told him. And I said, "So here's the text." And it said, "Irene, I think our daughter needs us. She's not feeling well. And I can't go to San Antonio and help her right now. I don't have any transportation. Can you make sure she's okay?" Well, of course I could, right? But the main point of that was, Irene, I think our daughter needs us. That's the relationship we've had. Her daughter, my daughter, has benefited. Her brothers have benefited from that relationship, that supportive relationship. And I had to be strong a couple of times and say, you're kind of overstepping your bounds here. I'm not going to give you money for, right? You have to figure out how to pay your own bills. What a difference an attitude of wanting to reunify kids can make, with the assumption that it's a reunifiable situation, right? And that reunification can lead to safe reunification and promoting well-being for those kids. And it has, because that's evident in the way they are parenting their children. So a story I tell when I have the opportunity, because I know there are a lot of foster families that come into the system and they're not encouraged to have those kind of relationships, or their systems in their counties or state are not really built around that anymore. It's like it's old. Well, it's new again, folks. That's been the theme of National Foster Care Month for the last 2 years, last year and this year. And so it's important that we talk about that. And I'm so happy that Cate was able to bring a little expertise to you.
Irene, I could listen to that story constantly. I love the fact that you continue to have such a great relationship with the birth family. And I think that it's kind of where we need to all be going in this country, is finding a way to bridge those relationships between foster care and families of origin and kinship care providers, all for the best interest of those children who need all of those positive relationships. All of the trauma research says that children who have undergone trauma are stronger when they have multiple strong parent and family relationships engaged in their lives. And that's what you're doing. And I think that's admirable, and we should be focusing on that and supporting foster families to provide that level of care throughout our country. I think that one of the things I guess we can recommend to families that are interested in learning more about this is that we have recorded 3 webinars with the help of the Centene Corporation that help families to understand what is happening right now in the country. The first one kind of lays out what the Family First Act says about the engagement and the relationship between birth and kinship families with foster families, and how that is being supported at the state level. So that's the first kind of the underpinning of the series. And then we go into being able to talk about family engagement. In this country, we are very much looking at family engagement as the way to make decisions in a team environment between foster and birth parents and kinship caregivers, in the best interest of children. And family engagement allows everyone to work together as a team to come up with a plan that will work for the children. And what we talk about in that second webinar is the importance of communication training. If we are going to truly embrace family engagement, we've got to make sure that everyone involved in the family engagement process knows how to communicate with one another, understands the empathy that's required to be able to work together, because it's so hard for foster parents who have, know the struggle the child has had and want to protect that child, to then have to turn around sometimes and support those children going back home. So family engagement gives us the opportunity to learn about what created that issue for that family, and then develop a strategy together how to protect the child and to stop that from happening, so that we allow children to be retained with their family roots. And then the next one in the series is about establishing healthy boundaries with the birth parent. So it's in that webinar, we're talking about, you still have to maintain the health of your family. So whatever relationship you're having with that birth parent, you need to together establish what those boundaries look like so that there's no infringement going on. You don't feel that you are being unnecessarily put on, and that there is a healthy respect between both the foster family and the birth family and the kinship family. Then the fourth one, which we haven't filmed yet, but I'm very excited about, that's coming up in June. We are actually bringing on Commissioner Milner, Jerry Milner, from the Administration for Children and Families to do a panel with us. We're also bringing on Chauncey Strong, who is very involved in bridging the gap and icebreakers, different kinds of training programs that help bring families of various types together, whether they're foster, kinship, or birth parents. He's very engaged in helping people understand the training necessary for making that happen. We'll also be having a family on with us who has been engaged in working with birth parents who can talk about their experiences and what that has meant for the children. So I think it's going to be an interesting little tie-up of our series, and I hope all of you will take advantage of this free training being offered by Centene and the National Foster Parent Association. There's training certificates available after you've watched the training, and there are going to be many more types of webinars. We didn't get to have our conference this year, but we are going to have some great webinars that you would have had the chance to engage with or participate in at our conference. So look forward to many more webinars from the National Foster Parent Association. And I encourage all of you to remember that you have superpowers and to use those superpowers, to continue to use those superpowers for the benefit of all the children in our country. And I thank you very much for being with us tonight, or this morning. I'm on the East Coast and I've got strange ideas about what the time zones are. So thank you very much. Use your superpower for the good of children. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Cate, thanks so much for being our guest today. You were wonderful. I knew you would be. You're such a wealth of information. And thank you for mentioning the 3 webinars you've facilitated so far this year and the one that you're about to do in June. So exciting. And that certainly will be added to our NFPA Training Institute website as well. So again, thank you for taking the time to do this. You are much appreciated. Bye, everybody. Have a great week.